Good evening. This is our November regular meeting and I call to order and ask for a roll call.
Mrs. Broderick?
Here.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Here.
Mrs. G?
Here.
Mrs. Aller?
You can join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt this agenda?
Remove.
Second. Roll call?
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Aller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have no one for recognition of the public, so I'll move right on to a presentation that Mrs. Johnson is going to give us on the 5-year forecast.
Susie puts it up on the screen. I had shared the packet with you, the actual forecast and the footnotes. So we're just going to review the highlights during the presentation tonight. Am I driving the sheet? Thank you. Okay, so we review the forecast twice a year. The forecast started out as a requirement of the Ohio Revised Code. The school districts adopt a version of the forecast in the fall and in the spring. It used to be October, now it's November and in May. And so you're following compliance of the law, but also we use this here in Wyoming as a decision-making tool. I mean, we look at the forecast sometimes daily, if not weekly, and Finance Committee reviews the parameters, a number of inputs that go into the forecast. We review those on a monthly basis. So it is a tool that we use on a very regular basis. We're thinking about making financial decisions in alignment with our financial stewardship pillar. So the forecast on the agenda tonight, the document has 3 years of historical revenues and expenditures, and then 5 years of projections. The current fiscal year that we're in, and then the next 4. And our fiscal years run July 1st through June 30th. So kind of aligned with the school year, but not exactly. And it is just a reminder, a general fund only report, which reports the general operation of the district, but certainly not all of our financial activity and not even all of our tax supported funds. So our bond funds are not reported in this forecast. Our permanent improvement fund with voted millage is not reported in this forecast. This is the general operating fund of the district, our general fund. And, our intent here is always to forecast the reliable trends, and we model based on all of the data that we have available, the best data that we have available to us. And of course, the current year and the next 1 or 2, that data is a lot more reliable than, if you think about years 4 and 5. That's where we're relying more on trend data. We'd like to start with revenue, think about where we get our money, how our money comes, and then we'll move to how we spend it. Our most material source of revenue, so our biggest bucket where we get most of our revenue from, is real estate taxes. And I think most folks know by now, if you've been following along on Finance Friday, or you read the information that was included in the quality profile, you know that our tax base is about 96% residential. We do not have lots of commercial industrial businesses in this school community. So 96% residents, about 2.5% commercial, and then just a little bit of public utility. So 41% of our general fund revenue comes from real estate taxes. And again, 96% of that is from residents. And so you can see the trend starting into that fiscal year 2020 and real estate tax collection or real estate tax revenue. So back in 2020, we were collecting about $10.7 million, forecasting out to the end of the forecast in 2029, about $11.6 million. And this is current operating revenue. So the forecast doesn't include any additional new levies or new millage. This is all current operating millage. We passed our last operating levy in May of 2017. That was an 8 mil operating levy. So that's important to remember as we think about, 1, the life of that levy, and then 2, when we get to the end and think about future operating levy needs, that the last one was passed in 2017. And so most folks remember that real estate taxes are generated off a combination of millage and property values. And so we know in our very recent history that everyone in Hamilton County saw an increase in their values. And here in Wyoming, we saw a 29% increase in our values. And now that we've seen a whole year of collection, we had been talking about all along that large increase in values was not going to generate 29% increase in revenue. And now that we've seen the full year of collection, we know that the 29% increase in value has resulted in a just over 2.5% increase in property tax revenue. And of course, that's due to something called House Bill 920, passed in 1976, that says that when values go up, the effective millage rate is reduced, and you can see that mathematically there on the screen. You can see the large valuation increase in 2023, and then you can see the reduction in the effective millage rate, because the way that voted property taxes are designed in Ohio law is that they're only allowed to collect what was originally approved. And so we talked about that in Finance Committee tonight. Just a reminder that if your property taxes went up, that means that somebody else's property taxes went down, because that mathematical calculation happens in the aggregate across the whole tax base. So 41% not going to grow except for a small amount outside of any request for additional millage. Okay, thanks, Susie. Our second biggest bucket, so our second most material source of revenue, is school district income tax. So about 31% of our total revenue. Two income taxes passed in Wyoming. The first in 1989, 0.75%. Second one in 1994, and so a total of 1.25. That is continuing and on all income. Gave you some stats there of recent collection growth. So our 24-year growth is about 2.89%. So we had been modeling a 3% increase in the forecast. Well, you just think about our 5-year history, and you can see the volatility of this line item just in the shape of this curve. But if we just think about what's happened recently and how that has impacted our forecasted amount moving forward, 21, we saw a decline, and I think that was just an unknown time, right? We're coming out of COVID. So we saw less than a 1% decline. And so then in 22, we modeled small growth and were surprised by almost 10% growth. And then 23, again, we modeled some healthy growth again, we're surprised, healthy collection. So 2 years of healthy collection there, 22 and 23, very healthy. Then in 24, we saw a decline. So that was last fiscal year, about a 1.5% decline. And so this year, fiscal year 25, we went back to our modeling of 3% growth, but we have reduced it in this adopted version of the forecast because we are halfway through our collection. So we've received 2 of our 4 payments, and we're running at about 1%. And we don't really have any indicators that are leading us to believe that that's going to have a material shift in the second half of the payment. So the next 2 quarterly disbursements. We get our biggest payment in July. And so we've already received the biggest one. And so we did see a little rebound in the payment that we just received in October, but not enough for us as a committee, finance committee, to be recommending any sort of shift. We do get some data from the city and look at their income tax collection. Theirs is a little more live, for lack of a better word. Ours is trailing, because if you think about the way that you pay your school district income tax, you don't pay it to me here in the district. You send it up to the state, and then it gets processed, and then it comes to us. So it's sort of a trailing indicator. And so our data lags theirs a little bit. And so they have been seeing some healthy collection, which is really what allowed us to keep the 3% growth in this forecast. So we'll continue to monitor this line item very carefully. We talk about it at every finance committee meeting, and we dig really deep into it every time we have a quarterly disbursement. So again, we're modeling that 3%, just expecting to continue to see a little bit of that volatility. So we talked about property tax being the most material. Second was income tax. And so now we get to state funding. So 3 buckets of revenue. The third, or the smallest one, is state funding, about 20% total. We've been talking about the new Fair School funding plan for a few years now. It's still currently being phased in, but it really doesn't matter because we're flatlined. So there's a lot of conversation at the state level when we're thinking about the next biennium budget. So the state budget's in 2-year cycles, and they're getting ready to start the next biennium budget. And so you may hear a lot of chatter about the inputs and the percentage of the phase in, and just know that none of that matters to us, because we are a guaranteed district. We've been flatlined since fiscal year 19. At this point, we're just one of the public schools who are just trying to hang on to the $5.8 million that we have. And, you might say, well, why are you hanging on? Like, where would the money go if it's not coming to us? There continues to be significant expansion at the state level towards vouchers. And I gave you just a little bit of comparison data there. So our funding from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 25 flatline. You can see that on the screen. You can see it on the graph. There's been small shifts in restricted versus unrestricted, but overall, just shy of $6 million, no growth at all. During that same period, voucher expansion, so money, state money being directed towards private education has expanded from about 350 million to just shy of $1 billion. So kind of hard to swallow for us as a public school who are doing incredible things in terms of student achievement. But something when you think about the advocacy of just trying to hang on to our just shy of $6 million in state money, that's what I'm referring to. Because there continues to be this expansion at the state level, redirecting public education dollars towards other things. And
That expansion, that's quite a huge difference between those two numbers there. We used to say the vouchers were used for kids who were at poverty or below, who were in school districts that were in danger of
failing.
failing. We used to say that's why we had the vouchers, but that's not true.
That is not true. There is, there's quite a bit of data coming out of the state that you can verify that vouchers are not being directed to students who are coming out, who are leaving failing schools, that they're being chosen by families who are already in private schools. Significant data across Southwest Ohio, Hamilton County, across the state. We're an example. If you pull our voucher data, you will see that there are more families in Wyoming taking vouchers, but we are not losing students. People aren't leaving Wyoming city schools and going to a private school and taking a voucher.
And again, that puts the burden on localities to run these operating levies with more frequency because of the minimal state funding and.
Yeah, you think about those first two revenue buckets. The Wyoming taxpayers have done their job. They've passed property tax levies, they've passed income tax levies. We've done a good job. You've diversified the tax base. You've done all the good things that, in theory that you think the state would want you to do, right? And we certainly are not winners in this new fair school funding plan at all.
I'm just curious with that increase to vouchers, I didn't pick up on this at the school board's conference, but has there been any increase in accountability measures that private schools have to follow
No.
that you know of?
No, in fact, there is some legislation currently being debated. I think,
To actually reduce it.
yeah, as soon as
Yeah.
I think initially that, I think what we were led to believe with that legislation was going to have those accountability measures. So from my chair, and Tim can kind of speak to it from the instructional side, from where I sit, public dollars that come to Wyoming city schools, we have significant accountability, following all of the purchasing regulations, audited annually, appropriations approved, so spending approved, hiring approved, licensure, all of that done by a locally elected board of education with the accountability that comes along with that. None of that applies when vouchers are sent to private schools. And so just from the financing side, I have a concern about that. So the continued state money that's sent to private schools with lack of accountability on just the financial governance side to it, Tim would be able to speak more clearly about the instructional lack of
Well, and it's the
accountability.
same thing when we look at just, if you think about the state report card and 6 indicators, just think about achievement and growth, and measuring its achievement and growth in those settings would be important. But that's a challenge.
Yeah. I don't want to get us too off track. But it does impact our lack of growth in our, what is our third bucket, but we'd like it to be a bigger bucket. So, because then it would make the reliance on the other two perhaps a little less. So, but in any case, the forecast assumes zero growth. That's probably the important thing. But it also assumes that we're hanging on to our just shy of 6 million.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm not forecasting growth and I'm not forecasting a reduction.
But over time, the value of that. is
Oh,
less and less.
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so we went through revenue pretty quick. Real estate taxes, income tax, and state funding. So then we're going to shift over to the expense side. And, this really shouldn't surprise anyone. Nothing has changed since the past few adoptions of our forecast. 80% of our budget is still targeted towards salaries and benefits. And again, we hire staff to serve our students. 80% is about the benchmark of public education across Ohio, and we're right there in line with it. So this includes all salary and benefits for about 230 staff members, including teachers, and non-certified, our maintenance staff, our in-house custodians, and of course, our administration. Our next biggest bucket after you get past salaries and benefits is purchase services. And so I'd like to explain this as just another layer of fixed costs, things that you might even be familiar with, a fixed cost in your home, utilities, transportation, some level of maintenance, some repairs, legal services, insurance. I'm not sure if I said insurance twice, but just a number of things there that are fixed costs for us, things that if we were forced to reduce our budget, both that 80% in salaries and benefits and this 13% in purchase services, those would be very difficult for us to reduce because these are things that you really can't do without. We have to have utilities. And do we take measures to achieve cost savings in any of these categories? Yes, we do. I mean, we participate in consortiums to lower our utility costs. We participate in a consortium across the school district in Hamilton County to be able to procure our subs in a more cost-effective way. We competitively bid both our transportation and our custodial services. We got quotes for our property insurance. We bid out our technology. So all of these things have different layers of financial stewardship built in them. But overall, they still comprise about 13% of our budget. And again, this is just another layer of fixed costs for us. So when you have 80% salaries and benefits and 13% in purchase services, you really don't have a whole lot left. So this category, materials and supplies and capital outlay, about 3.5%. And this is stuff that our teachers use in classrooms, our teachers and our students use every day. So textbooks and instructional supplies, and some of that comes from a fee. So the fee for instructional supplies shows up on the revenue side, but then the outlay of it shows up on the expense side. And then capital outlay accounts for our technology plan, both devices and infrastructure. And so you put all of those, put all the revenue in, and then you take all the expenses out, and what you have left is cash balance. And so we have been monitoring our cash balance against something that we call the cash balance benchmark. And again, that's just a tool that is, a good quality tool used across not just public education, but governmental accounting. And when we think about our board approved benchmark, and that benchmark is $5 million. So we did an analysis a few years ago and said, what is a cash balance that is going to give us a healthy measure of being able to manage our bills and be able to pay our salaries and benefits and invest in a proper way. And so we identified that benchmark as $5 million. And so since the last levy passed in 2017, we wrapped up fiscal year 24, 7 consecutive years of a balanced budget, which means we spent less than we received, okay? The opposite of that, or the adverse of that, is deficit spending. So we are spending more than we are taking in. And that is the forecast for fiscal year 25. That is the life cycle of a school levy. It happens to every public school district. School levies, that is how schools are funded in Ohio. So you pass a school levy, you take that influx of revenue, you have expenses. Similar in our case, your expenses continue to grow, both increases in wages and benefits, and also inflationary increases in those other categories that we talked about. And so as your expenses increase in just a regular way, because of what we know and understand about how revenue works in Ohio, we know that property taxes aren't going to increase in a material way without a new operating levy. We've seen the volatility in income tax, and in many ways, income tax is what has kept us off of the ballot. Property taxes don't grow outside of a new levy, except for really small amounts, and it's not ever enough to keep up with the inflationary growth of your expenses. But and our income tax helps us a little bit, and so that is was a good measure for us. But we're at the end of our levy cycle, so we're in the point of the levy cycle now where we are forecasting to deficit spend. which means that you are just eating into that cash balance. And so, this forecast is pointing towards, again, eating it into that cash balance over the next few years, which means we are going to need to do one of three things. That is raise revenue, reduce expenditures, or some combination of both. There are no other options. Okay, those are your only choices when you have depleting cash balance. Those are the only choices for any public school district: raise revenue, reduce expenditures, or some combination of both. And so, we work really hard to control our expenditures and, as I said, when we started, we use this 5-year forecast as a tool weekly, if not daily. And we use it at the board level when we're making financial decisions. So, we think about, certainly our salaries and benefits, and then our purchase services, and even to some extent, the materials and supplies and technology that we purchase for use in our classrooms. We think of all of those things as fixed costs. And so really, really difficult to make reductions without really eating into the heart of what's happening in our classrooms. So that's why you always hear public schools talk about, oh gosh, you have to make cuts. It ends up being staffing or programming. And I mean, that's just the reality of how school district budgeting works. So when we think about our general fund, we will need additional operating revenue in the next 3 to 4 years. So if every single number on this forecast was exactly accurate, and I started by saying that we know it isn't, it's just the forecast of a reliable trend. So will these numbers change? 100%. Is the trend going to change? No, it will not. Okay, we are going to be deficit spending, and we are going to start eating into our cash balance. But if every single number on here was accurate, we would be looking at an operating levy in 2027 to be able to support our need to stay above that $5 million cash balance benchmark in fiscal year 28. And again, if every single number on here was right, that's somewhere between a 6 and a 7 mil operating levy in 2027. But that's a few years away still to get that tight on a anticipated millage. But I know we just are coming off of an incredibly successful bond issue, but we can't ignore the fact that, our operating cash balance and our operating forecast is pointing towards the need for a future operating levy in the next couple of years. Questions about that?
I'm just grateful they got to spread out even more than we thought, right? When you first passed it in 2017, you thought that'd be closer, and then looking at facilities for 3 to 4 years, we looked at that so much that they weren't overlapping or year to year, back to back. So the fact that hopefully we can even spread them out a few years is great. And so grateful that you came up with that when I first started on the board. That's when you were really looking at that cash balance. And I think it's so helpful to look at every year as a guidance, but especially when we look at the other communities who might have failed their operating levy because maybe they don't have the same kind of system to look at that. Yeah. Thank you. Every time we say it, I'm like, so good. One day we're gonna be able to say it all that well. I rewrite the same notes every time you do it, so that maybe it'll say it, with such ease. Thank you. One day.
Forecast will be on the board later in the agenda tonight for your consideration.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll need to vote on it, but it comes later.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? We'll move on then to our committee reports, belonging and inclusion.
We met last Tuesday online, and we had a wonderful presentation on restorative practices. Keone Brockman and Jim Kirshner about all the benefits of approaching challenges through that lens and through that practice, and how we can still hold people, students and others accountable, but at the same time allow them to stay engaged and re-engaged and recommit to the larger process and the larger goals. So it was an exceptional evening, it really was.
Was it in line with like what we're doing, or is it kind of where we're hoping to go in terms of discipline or?
Yeah, I think part of it was sharing what practices are happening, but the part of it was just exploring how this can be spread throughout all schools and just continue to grow and grow and grow. Yeah.
It did make it seem like, because remember a few years ago, at least you and I feel like some other people
yeah.
sat in some restorative practices
Yeah.
presentations, and I remember talking about it then, and then the way she talked about it is like that. But just kind of how education as a whole often doesn't always do restorative practices, right? It's a little punishment or this happened, so this is the consequence of it, and just how can we find that balance
Right.
for us?
Right.
They connected it to the strategic plan, the larger objectives and structures and frameworks that we have in place, so, it's, very eye-opening and encouraging.
Erica, I think always does well with starting it with, like reflection on the month. You're good at like reiterating it, tying it to the goals, looking back at the objections, reviewing what we've done in the previous month so that we are talking about how we're bringing back what we're talking about into the school.
Mhm.
This past time you did head, heart, and hands activity.
Yeah.
Honestly too, and I thought I was fine, then I started talking, I was like, am I crazy? Sure. So I just, yeah. Oh, good. So it's,
And it's nice, each month, different participants are leading that main discussion. And you can see it just creating opportunities later on in the year to circle back to say, okay, which ones of these topics can we take to a larger scale across the district to continue to grow K-12? Just phenomenal discussions.
How are the new community members?
They're great. Yeah. And everybody's jumped in. I mean, everyone is very engaged and,
Everyone
participating.
signed up for a topic each month.
Yeah.
So we're not
Yeah.
having to beg anyone.
Right.
and that's good. I wasn't
Yeah,
sure
it's
if
a
it
new
was
structure
you
that's
two a
working
lot.
well. Yeah.
Very good.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Citizens Advisory Committee, we also had a meeting. We're into our Zoom meetings now where we have a little bit of a opening discussion among ourselves and then the two groups, because we only have two programs this year, go off. And this time Elia and Tim and I each, as a group, we went into the two different groups. And they had good questions. They had lots of questions, and we will be meeting again, tomorrow? No, next week. Next week, not tomorrow.
No.
District leadership team?
I'll share that. We had a meeting on the 21st, and the main topic for the meeting was looking at the 2026 and 2027 calendars. We're trying to come up with a few different drafts to consider for the 26-27 year. That's a special year when we think about primary facilities, because when we think about the schedule and the timeline, we would anticipate that there's more movement in the summer of 2027 for all students. You know, with our current plan, we've got Hilltop students would be moving from their temporary facilities into a new school building, and Element Vermont would be moving from their current buildings into temporary schools. And so what we're trying to do is think of the 26-27 calendar starting earlier to end earlier, and then the 27-28 calendar starting later to end later, so that we can stretch out the summer of 27. So it's just taking a careful look at that calendar. And so next steps then, we will, we think we're in a position where we've got two different drafts to share with staff soon, and we'll be going out to our parent advisory committees to share those two different drafts and get feedback. Again, right now zooming in on the 26-27 calendar. And then if we can narrow that down to one, the goal would be to bring that to the board as a first read, and most likely in January, but if we could bring it in December, we'd do that, but probably January.
Okay. What's Mr. Nolan Kelly's, anyway, with the levy pass, so you can really focus on it, where that was kind of like
Yeah.
on hold,
Yeah.
like that timeline, obviously.
Okay. The facilities committee.
Not
Busy.
Well,
No,
couple
I'm
things.
kidding. Gotta gear up now.
Yeah, here we go. So I'll start off and anyone can jump in. So just, first of all, just thankful to the Wyoming community for the incredible support in the bond issue. Phenomenal support, which means opportunities for students. And we are so excited to support our youngest kiddos for a long time to come in Wyoming. So cannot overstate the benefit that we have in living in a community that supports Office of Education. So very exciting. So, yeah, lots going on, and so you'll see some of those things show up on the agenda here today, you know that. Just to highlight a few of those, the request for qualifications for architects was posted. Those are due on or before December 4th. And, so those will be reviewed, and, excited about that step happening. Today on the agenda, you'll see 2 resolutions that are being recommended for your approval. And again, those are connected to the primary facilities master planning process and the facilities construction. And then we will be setting up a special board meeting on Wednesday, December 11th. Looks like that will be the date now, and that will be to interview finalists for those primary facilities architects that are sharing their qualifications. So exciting times, lots and lots to happen. But again, looking forward to what this means for our kids.
Have we had a good response to the RFQs?
We've had a number of people asking for additional information, so the notice that goes out is pretty general, like the board is, asking, and then there's a lengthier document that if they want more information that I send to them. And I think, 10, 12.
Seems like a lot to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll know at noon on Wednesday the 4th how many actually submit, but I feel like there's been quite a bit of interest. So it's been great. I know I've been fielding some questions, you probably have too.
Yep.
So it's been great.
Kids are starting to ask questions. I made a surprise visit on the announcements, at the primary schools talking about primary facilities, so they're very excited about it. Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Probably like, hurry up.
Yeah.
Gavin.
I try to drop that lightly on the current primary students, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, so we're on time and on schedule, and I guess you'll talk about that a lot.
So far.
When we get to the resolutions,
Right.
and, but there will be something happening almost weekly.
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right,
Exciting.
off we go then. Finance Committee, we met before you all did.
Somebody want to take a stab at that, or I'm happy to.
I'm happy here as well.
All right,
We
go
discussed
for it.
vouchers, I mean, similar to the comments that were made during the 5-year forecast discussion that Rhonda presented on. We talked about the impact of vouchers, how it continues to eat away, and some potential that, public schools could experience and how we might, get involved in addressing that and challenging that. And so, I think that conversation about getting involved in the voucher lawsuit, will be presented to the policy, review committee, very soon. We talked about bond issue planning, and really some of the things we're going to see with respect to the timing and the issuance of the bonds early within our allowance. And then, of course, a presentation on the 5-year forecast, which is what we just saw. So all in all, a lot covered.
We did our usual monthly numbers that we look at. Nothing unusual to report. That's good. Moving on. The policy committee, our meeting had to be changed, so there's nothing to report.
Coming soon.
All right, so now we are at the board of education report. We have 2 resolutions.
The first one, item A, is a resolution certifying to the county auditor the amount of the voted property tax to be levied and collected for the purposes of paying debt charges for 37 years. And this is basically just a certification to the auditor that certifies that the levy passed, and we're gonna ask the auditor to collect the 7.98 mils that were voted. I did get the certification from the Board of Elections today, so that's great. And so we'll pass this resolution and submit it, file it with the county auditor's office tomorrow. And then, November elections are tough because, the tax rates have to be set and bills generated and all that has to happen pretty fast. So the auditor really doesn't love November elections. There's just a lot that has to be done, just to get all the tax rates set and then taxes calculated and bills sent in a short window. So pending the board's approval tonight, we'll get that to the county auditor. Of course, they know what the vote was, so they're expecting this. But this is probably step 3 of 5,842 steps. So, but a necessary, kind of a technicality.
Okay.
And then I do need separate votes on these, just
Okay.
so they have separate resolution numbers.
So may I have a motion to approve Board of Education report regarding letter A.
So moved.
Second.
I have a roll call.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Thank you. And item C is a resolution authorizing the issuance of school improvement unlimited tax general obligation bonds anticipation notes not to exceed $15 million. And I'll give a little bit of background on this. You've been following along on Finance Friday. You saw a little blurb about this. Obviously our taxpayers or the voters approved $72.5 million in bonds. Issuing the bonds is a pretty lengthy process that will not be accomplished by the end of calendar year 2024. So we're going to request to issue $15 million in tax anticipation notes. And there's a couple reasons to do this. The first is that the $15 million is a special number because there's a small issuer exemption and something called arbitrage. There's a law that says that you can't borrow tax exempt money at a certain rate and then invest it at a higher rate and make money. The IRS doesn't let you do that. We're not allowed to do that unless you have a small issuer exemption at $15 million. And so you're allowed to do that. So we want to take advantage of that and issue this $15 million. And then we get to keep all of the interest on the $15 million because we're going to get this money in first and we're going to spend it last. So we're going to keep all of the interest that we earn on this $15 million, which is going to help the project. And then also by issuing the tax anticipation notes, we can move forward with the architect process without having the bonds. Because we would like, of course, to get an architect on board as soon as possible so that we can start moving forward with design and swing space and all the things that are going to happen really quick to keep the project on schedule. And so again, just having those notes issued allows us to earn interest, be exempt from arbitrage, and execute the contract with the architect all before the end of calendar year 2024. These are notes, they'll be paid off when we issue the bond. We'll issue the full 72.5 million bonds in the spring, pay off the notes. So these notes have a May due date. So they're short-term notes.
And that sale would happen in December?
Yeah, we have an anticipated closing, or the pricing date of December 17th and anticipated closing date of December 30th. We're kind of a little close, but again, that's a November election.
Yeah. All right, thank you. May I have a resolution, or, no, I'm sorry, an approval for, the resolution listed under letter C?
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Sheedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the treasurer's report, if you want to keep going.
Thanks, Jeannie. Item A, approval of the minutes from the October 28th regular meeting and the November 13th planning meeting. Item B, for the statement of revenues and expenditures for month ending October 31st. Item C, accept with appreciation the donation from the athletic boosters. Item D, the appropriation adjustments for the month of November. And item E, approval of the 5-year forecast as submitted. And F, approval of the report, please.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I will second. And then may I have a roll call?
Mrs. Aller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheet?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. I have several personnel recommendations. To begin with, number one is a recommendation for resignation that was submitted by a staff member. Number two is recommendation to approve resignation for the purpose of retirement. And so I'll stop on that just for a moment. That is Kathy Hofer, principal's administrative assistant at the high school. And Kathy, was hired in 2004 as the principal's administrative assistant and was a class advisor, I think, for 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, on and off at different times, and for many, many years, and has just done an incredible job of supporting student, staff, and our family. So excited for her. Number three is a recommendation to approve a resolution for an extension of the interim administrative assignment for Jamie Hayner. And so I'll give you a little bit of background on this. Jamie's doing a great job at the middle school as an interim assistant principal. She currently has a principal's license for pre-K through 6th grade. This resolution would allow her to obtain a 1-year alternative principal's license that would extend all grades 5 through 8 at the middle school. And then that is connected to number 4, which is a recommendation for a personnel change, and that would be for Jamie Hayner to be the interim assistant principal from, we had set that up to go through December 20th, but this would extend that from January 6th all the way through June 30th. So she'll continue in that capacity for the remainder of the year, supporting our middle school students and our middle school staff and families. Number 5 is a recommendation to approve this unpaid FMLA leave. Number 6, recommendation to approve the non-athletic supplemental contract changes. Number 7, recommendation to approve the athletic supplemental contracts that you see on the agenda there. 8, recommendation for this non-athletic supplemental contract. That's a singular one. Number 9, recommendation to approve pay for staff members participating in Friday study or detention monitoring, and that's at the supervisory rate. Number 10 is a recommendation to approve the Linked Up Connect stipend for career connectors. That's a lot. I'll give you some background on this. This would approve Nikki Button, Ariana Sanders for being the Linked Up Connector people. They are working with Hamilton County within this new program. We're actually receiving funds from Hamilton County for the work that they're doing. And the Linked Up Connect, it's a new online platform that supports students in ways such as pre-apprenticeships, internships, job shadowing, community service, lots of different things connected to the interest that students have. And so this also connects back to the CAC study that we had regarding student internships. So it's a great opportunity. And so switching gears then, item B is a recommendation to approve all staff members who have completed their science of reading training. Again, this is happening throughout the year. Many of our staff members completed this training before the state required this training this past year, but this is for individuals that are keeping up with it throughout the year.
And that money will come to us? I mean, is that our
Yes.
general fund money that?
So we pay originally the stipend, and then we are reimbursed from the state, those funds. Yep, as soon as they do the training, we pay the stipend, and then we submit those names to the state, and the state reimburses us for that. Item C is a recommendation to approve disadvantaged pupil impact aid and student wellness and success funds. And so a little background on this. Ohio districts receive funds to support wraparound services for students. And so this recommendation actually is to approve the use of those funds to enhance student support. And in our district, we're enhancing that through the use of our district psychologist and the addition of 2 board certified behavior analysts. And so you might have heard the term BCBAs to support students in our schools. And so that's how we're utilizing those funds. Those are not new funds. Rhonda might be able to speak to this a little bit more. They're not new funds. They're funds that come as part of the state funding that we receive, but they're restricted to be used in specific areas. And this is how we're using it within that requirement.
Yeah, so remember, we looked at that bar graph, and we about $5.8 million from the state. Well, a couple years ago, we used to get this revenue or a version of it, it was less than, and it came in a separate fund, so outside of the general fund. And then, in another way to reduce funding to public schools, they said, oh, we're just gonna throw it into your 5.9 million, and now it's gonna be restricted. So actually, that 5.8 is less, because we had to carve this part out, because it used to be different. So just another layer of,
So it's not
Right.
additional money in any
No,
way?
it's not.
no, it's just more restriction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow.
yes, it's the opposite of additional money. Yes, it is just more restriction of the flat line of state funding that we have been at since fiscal year 19.
Oh,
However-
heavy sum.
However, looking to use that in the most appropriate way to support our students. Yeah.
Right,
Yep.
yeah.
The behavioral, the
BCBAs.
BCBAs are county employees?
Yes.
So we're pulling them from the ESC.
Right.
So they show up in that purchase services line item.
Okay.
And truly an incredible support to our overall system with kids. Then item D is a recommendation to improve the baseball camp, and that is scheduled for February 8th through the 22nd. Item E, a recommendation to approve the overnight field trips. You can see the middle school model UN trip scheduled for April 27th through the 29th of 25. And the Ohio Junior Classical League Convention, scheduled for March 7th through the 9th of 25. Great opportunities for kids.
Okay, any questions, any other? I have to admit, when I read about the baseball camp, I was in February.
I know.
Yeah.
What, are they going to Florida? What is this? But that's what happens when you have a champion center.
That's right. Yep.
You can do these things. All right, thank you. May I have a, motion to approve the superintendent's report?
So moved.
Second,
Thank you. May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
yes.
Mrs. Sheet?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The nutrition services update, and you all have a,
You should have a copy of it. It's brief, and I think Susie's gonna pull it up here, so you're welcome to look at the board for this too. Milford Food Services provides this update each year, and it's a requirement for us to share this with you on an annual basis. I'll share the highlights, from this brief report. Tina Reynolds, Director at Milford Food Services, shared this with us, and you know Tina, she has worked with us, when we had our CAC study. And she's really done an exceptional job of trying to really connect with our school district, understand what our needs are, what our hope is for continuous improvement within our nutrition services. And so it's really been a pleasure to work with her and continue working with her. So if we just flip through, Susie, if you want to go to the next page, again, just some highlights. Right, trying to get to the next one, right? So you can see a little bit of background here on the vision of Milford Food Services as they work with our district and nutritional standards. I think it's the whole idea of achieving a healthy mind and body is what they're after. And through that dialogue and that connection that they've had through our CEC, I feel like we're closer than we ever have been at having great conversations. And I feel like they're good listeners. Will shift, and as we're looking at primary facilities in particular, it'll be interesting to work with Milford Food Services to understand what our needs are, especially for our youngest kiddos. The structure of the food service program, and they're trying to, Milford Food Services they're trying to make this as flexible as possible, but it's built on a 4 to 6 week cycle, as you can see there. They do have conversations with us about potential specialty meals based on what time of year it is, what interests our students might have at the time. And they also do offer catering possibilities, and we take advantage of that as a district, and individually some of our school levels use their catering services, and they do quite well with that. Their motto here is the whole idea of offer versus serve, and how do we embed choice? And I think one of the initiatives that they're trying to grow more and more each year is just the whole idea of choice and healthy choice. And how do we make sure we're informing students and offering choice? So you can see some of the ways in which that happens within our program. And again, this love the Wyoming shirt there, right, and stand in the line. You can see how this speaks to then our program again. I think Tina shares here some specific new restrictions regarding sugar. And during the CAC study, we learned a lot about the restrictions that they're governed by. And again, trying to do the very best they can with taste and with options with kids, but also within the regulations that they have to abide by. And so you can see there also a smart snack requirement there. And so then I think that last page is just resources, and the idea behind this is connecting with us. And I think their goal is to be connected. And so they're always looking for feedback. I think the more the better as we think about how we want to make sure that our program supports our kids. So our website will have more information. Anyone can reach out to them and see your contact information there.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Now it's your turn for an
It's my
update.
turn, yep. It's hard to believe, tomorrow is the last day before Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving holiday coming up, and then 3 weeks to go. for the first semester. It is crazy that we are at the end of the first semester already. So, yeah, so I just wanted to give some general updates on specific key events or actions that are happening over the next month or so. First, I will lead with the update on the special education and intervention audit. We've tried to have a steady rhythm of updates on how that's progressing. Sure. Sure. All right. Let's continue on. The owl is still working. No, it's fine.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so within the audit, right now, the county has recently completed the interview process. That was one of the final stages of the audit functions. They've shared that a report will be provided to the district near the end of December. I know that's pushed back about a week and a half, but that will be coming to us in December. And so what will happen then is the county will meet with the district to share the findings of the audit and the recommendations that come from the audit. And my hope is to schedule that meeting for the first week after winter break when we return. So I'm trying to turn them around as soon as possible. And then, of course, I would plan on updating the board on those findings and the recommendations that come from that audit in January. And then from that point, we'll turn that into planning for the 25-26 school year. That's in January. That's when we begin the planning process for major goals and actions to support continuous improvement in the district. And this will be one of the key bits of information that will be utilized to plan for growth. So excited about that. If I have any updates at the December meeting, I'll share that with the group. Shifting gears, again, tomorrow being the last day before Thanksgiving break, we typically have a phone message that goes out. So we're planning for a phone message to go out at 5:15 tomorrow, if all goes well. And so expect that. And it's a great way to say, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, but really it's also a test of our phone system to make sure that that is working for inclement weather or emergencies of any kind. Senior trip. Let's see, what time is it? They're probably getting back pretty soon. They're finishing up their trip to DC. Great experience. Kids enjoyed it. If you've been on social media, you've seen some of the pictures of the kids. I'm sure they're sleeping on a bus right now. But it looks like it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. And then you also have a copy of holiday concerts coming up. So make sure that you get those on your calendar. That begins on Tuesday, December 3rd. We have orchestra concerts happening. It ends on December 12th with the high school holiday showcase, which is a big deal. But you can see on December 9th, we have choirs being celebrated. December 7th, we have WSMA Fortissimo to go. On the 11th, we've got band that we're celebrating. So lots of opportunities to celebrate students in the holidays. And then the other thing, you probably know about this, but I want to make sure it's on our radar. Cole Rensberger. You've seen Cole's PSA video, and you've learned about the voting opportunity. Voting is open for his public service announcement up through January 20, I think it's the 26th. Yeah, it is the 26th. And he has created this powerful video that speaks to suicide awareness and just an incredible display. And so there are 3 students who are part of the competition right now. And the student that gets the most votes will actually have their PSA announcement or their PSA video played during the Super Bowl. It's huge. It's huge.
You can vote more than once. I voted, and then it's like, you have voted. Okay, like you can
Oh,
do it
so
daily.
now-
It's, I believe it's email based.
Yes.
So if you have different email addresses, you can vote with each of your.
You have to
email
put your
addresses.
name and your phone number.
But if
and
you
your
feel like I
email,
voted
so-
once and then like, you're done voting.
Yeah,
You
that happened to
can't-
me too.
It is not like
A
a vote
daily-
every day
Okay,
currently.
Okay.
The current way that it is working is if you can vote a
Okay.
single time with a single email.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure was
But
I
if you have
missing it, not doing it.
Multiple email addresses, you can
And
vote
you
with each
you
of them.
too, not to interject it, but Cole and I'm sorry, the gentleman who was in the
Jackson
video,
Kreitzer,
thank you,
yeah.
Jackson Kreitzer.
Yes.
Their interview on the news was great too. I'm like that,
Yeah.
they were very articulate. It's nerve wracking to be interviewed on the news.
Yeah.
And
They-
so,
I
They
think
did
the
a really
teachers
nice
kind of wrapped their arms around them too, like they did a
Yeah.
little prep with one of
well,
our teachers the day
I mean, all
before.
of it.
Like people really were like stepping up to support them, and there's a lot of excitement in the building
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah,
nice
and,
job.
and in the student assembly, when this was
Right.
announced, I mean, it was just an incredible following, of the kids and a wonderful show of support from peers. And it was really heartwarming. It was cool. It was powerful. Yep, it's wonderful, yeah. I mean, he's talented, yeah. Yep.
He's already got a Joe Burrow signed football.
That's right. So vote,
Vote,
gotta get the
vote.
message out, keep going as much as you can. Yep. Okay. Yep, that's it.
Oh, all right.
That's
thank
it,
you.
sorry.
Well, we're-
Any other questions? Sorry.
I was.
I didn't mean that.
Something else. All right, thank you. In that case, may I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. And a second.
Second,
Right, great, and a roll call.
Mr. Feldmeyer,
yes.
Mrs. G,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller,
Yes,
Mrs. Berger.
thank you. Thank you, we're adjourned.
Right.